Oh yeah, this is for all like my producer people. Fortet on his production process, I pretty much only use presets. You don't need to work that hard. You don't need to make every single sound from scratch. You don't need to Etsy handcraft every single piece of your music, right? Like it's always funny to me that people will be so like anal and like crazy about sound design and like, oh, I gotta make every single sound, but they'll use drum samples that somebody else made. It's like, where's the using presets? Totally fine. Cyan, Trace, and I found a loop in a Virtual Riot pack that Illenium used. It was like almost unchanged. A Virtual Riot loop, Illenium Shivering. That's the song. There's a straight Virtual Riot loop, almost unchanged, maybe a little bit. It's not a big deal. Like that. My whole point. I'm not roasting Illenium. I genuinely don't give a crap. But more power to you, really. He says, I'm definitely not one of those people that it's like, I'm going to start with the sine wave and then I'm going to do this. Nobody is. Nobody making hit records or getting signed or getting on agencies and management and all that. Nobody's doing that. Like, you starting using presets as a starting place or as inspiration for a sound design, A-okay. Totally fine. And I thought about it like this when I read this. If you play a guitar, you can put it through different processing or whatever, but a guitar is a guitar, right? You can't make it anything else, right? And I feel like people hate on people who use presets, but like they're like, oh, I'm an instrumentalist. That's like a real life preset. When it comes to making music, less is oftentimes more. Such is a cause for Fortet, who admits he pretty much only uses presets for his tracks. Again, like it's not a big deal. The electronic artist, real name Kieran Hebden, appears on the latest episode of Tape Notes podcast, where he dives deep into his creative process and the reason he prefers to keep things minimal during production. If you want to make music quickly, you're not going to handcraft every single sound. You know, if you find a good preset, maybe don't just use it as is. My point in saying that is like Illenium's doing it, Fortet using straight up, I think he says Omnisphere presets, which Omnisphere is gas, but you don't need to be that hard on yourself. If you like a preset that you want to use in a song, change it just enough to like where it's not just the preset, just me, but if it's good, sometimes it's just drag and drop and draw the MIDI, right? Or sometimes samples are just good as is, right? I wouldn't say just do a loop like Illenium. He says, I'll get a sound, I'll get the melody, the notes I want, and then I'll get it up and running on Omnisphere. I'll be like, all right, where are the bass sounds? And I'll just cycle through loads and loads of them, one after the other, till I find one that's quite nice. I'll just choose a preset. That will be it. I'm not doing any sound design stuff particularly on any of my things. That's crazy. I don't really mess with any fundamental stuff like that because I'm usually in a rush. He's probably ghost producing or something. Like, why else would you be in a rush? I get asked these questions like, what's your plugin chain, this and that, like I showed you on the sessions. Most of my stuff, there's no plugins on there. That's crazy. He continues, ideally you're doing as little as possible. I pretty much never want to put a compressor on anything. If I have to put a compressor on something, it's to deal with the problem, usually. Mainly, I want everything to be as dynamic and open and natural as possible. And then you squish it on the mix and master. You just drive the limiter as hard as you can. Rather than obsess over the technicalities, musicians should instead be thinking about the song as a whole and what narratives are being achieved throughout the piece of music. I highly agree with this statement. But use a compressor, bro. Elsewhere in the podcast, Fortet dives deeper in his production philosophies, explaining how he works with texture and subtlety to create connections between the listener and the music. Okay, his overall mission, I'm all for it. I'm all for it 100%. But the not using a compressor on anything, like, do you sidechain? No plugins? Nothing? I mean, maybe I'll go through and actually like listen to this podcast and see what he's talking about. I find that hard to believe. Like, there's got to be something in there. But dude, if that's really how he's producing, then like that's genuine talent to go through that many presets all the time. No compression, just a raw, uncompressed. And I get you want dynamics and stuff, but like you're just, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about this, but what I do feel like very strongly about is like you don't need to make every single sound in your song. You're using drum samples. Why not use presets too? Right? Like you should be doing a blend of things. I personally don't like the whole drag and drop thing. adding a little bit of your own flair or adjusting the sample or preset to fit your mix. That's what I like to do generally. But I would not recommend to use no compression in your mix. Just me. That's just me personally. Jaden says, dude is my hero. Just raw dogging music. Yep. Bernard says, crazy. That is crazy. That's honestly interesting.